Thank you for tuning in to SFA, Streator First Assembly of God in Streator, Illinois. Come join us every Sunday morning at 9 a.m. for Sunday School, Coffee Connection at 10 a.m., and 10:30 a.m. for a worship experience and Kids Church. Our Coffee Connection is a great time to get with other people and fellowship and have free snacks and drinks. This week we will be ordering church t-shirts. They come in blue, coral, and gray. Please let us know your size and the color that you'd like to order. Revolution Youth will be hosting a back-to-school party at the DeWitt's house this Wednesday night at 7 o'clock. Those wanting to be baptized should come at 5 o'clock. Kids Conference is coming up on October 13th. Please see Pastor Amy for more details on this very fun event. Looking ahead, Trunk or Treat is coming up in October 27th. Be ready to come and decorate your trunk. Looking even farther ahead, Lego Night is back on November 10th. Come join us for this very fun outreach as we reach out to our community and have a great time with families. Now enjoy the service.
Beautiful weather to wake up and drive through town, see people setting out on their porches, looking at the flowers and the birds. You ever taken time just to go outside and listen to the birds singing early in the morning? Or just smell that special smell that you smell when you go out in the morning, the dew still on the grass? I want to ask you a question while I prepare myself for church today. What is your neighbor's name? Now, I didn't ask how close is your neighbor. I asked what is your neighbor's name. What about the one on the left-hand side? The one on the right. Some of you may even have neighbors behind you or in front of you. Today we want to talk about, won't you be my neighbor? In Luke 10:27 it says this: love the Lord your God with all your heart, with all your soul, and with all your strength and with all your mind, and love your neighbor as yourself. Love your neighbor as yourself. Jesus makes this statement because he knows how arrogant, how prideful, and how conceited we naturally are. So he tries to take the thing that we would love the most, and he says, I want you to love your neighbor like that, so he picked us. Love your neighbor like you love yourself. We can bring the lights up just a little bit more. That's fine. But while we're on this subject of, won't you be my neighbor? Roger, could you shut that door for me so that we're not hearing kids running up and down the hallway? Thank you so much, sir. But while we're on the subject of won't you be my neighbor, Lynn had called me up and said, Pastor, my daughter's going to be moving in and I don't know where we're going to put her stuff. I don't have extra storage. Nobody has extra storage. I don't care where you live. I don't care how many barns you have. You build a barn for what? To fill it. Nobody builds a garage to keep it empty. And so I said, well, you got your old garage that you don't use. Maybe me and Daniel can clean it out. So we went over there. We spent a day and we just cleaned the daylights out of this garage. Looked like nobody had been in it in 50 years. So we got it all cleaned and all nice. And so they came Friday night, late in the evening, and just unloaded the trailer and just threw the stuff in the garage. And it immediately stressed her out because Lynn is a neat person. Not, well, she is neat like she's neat and fun. But I'm talking about like neat clean. She likes things to be in order. And when you've lived on your own for 7 years, you kind of are allowed to do that. And somebody stepped into her world and kind of shook it a little bit. She was not real fond of that. So she called me up Friday night and said, is there any way that you and Daniel could come tomorrow and help unload? They're actually bringing 2 more trailers full. And I don't know how we're going to fit it. I said, Daniel and I'll take care of it. So we got there. She didn't even want to open the door to the garage because she was stressed. We got it. We said, hey, we're big enough or dumb enough, one of the two, maybe. That we'll get this stuff stacked and straightened up. And do you know now, we don't know yet, Daniel and I have got to go look at how they did the 3rd load. We did the first 2 loads. Yes, sir. But it really should only take up about half of her garage when that first load looked like it was taking up her entire garage. And she made this statement to me while I've had this message on my heart for 2 weeks now, since God didn't let me preach it last week. She said, Pastor, I don't know what I would do without you. And I said, Lynn, I'm doing for you what you would do for me. And she can't come over to my house. I wish she could. I'd let her. She can't come over to my house and straighten my garage up, clean it up, put everything in place. But there's gifts that she has, and she operates in them. And I know for a fact if I needed to ride somewhere and I was stranded, Lynn would get in her car, drive it, and pick me up, no matter where, when, how, or what. No questions. But that's how neighbors are supposed to be. Here's the question that I have for you. So there was a story. One day a lawyer asked Jesus what he had to do to have eternal life. And when Jesus asked him what God's law said, the lawyer answered, love the Lord your God with all your heart and love your neighbor as yourself. Jesus answered, you're right. Do this and you will live. But the man wanted to make himself look good. So he asked Jesus another question. Something dangerous in us happens when we keep asking him questions. And it's kind of like, This doesn't happen a lot in our house, but there's times where I'm tired or I'm hurting or I'm stressed, and it's, hey Dad, hey Dad, hey Dad. And I'm like, I don't know all the answers to everything. Just let me sit here. You know what I'm talking about, parents? You've had that? Sometimes I think we need to do that with Jesus. It's like, oh, just one more question, Jesus. Thankfully, he doesn't get irritated with us like we get irritated with our kids. But he says, hold on, I got another question. This is a lawyer, smart, intelligent. What question does he ask Jesus after Jesus gives him this command to love your neighbor as you love yourself? What is his second question to Jesus? Who is my neighbor? Do you think this lawyer was dumb enough that he didn't know who his neighbor was? Have you ever thought about that? Like, I don't think I would hire that lawyer. He doesn't even know who his neighbor is. How in the world is he going to get me out of this mess? So to answer this question, Jesus told a story about a man who was traveling from Jerusalem to Jericho. When he was attacked by a group of robbers, they beat him, they took his money, they stripped him of his clothes, and they left him beside the road to die. A priest came by, and when he saw the man, he crossed over to the other side of the road and continued on his way. Sounds like some of our churches, doesn't it? Oh, yeah, you got some bad luck. Yeah, you ran into the wrong people. You stink. I'll send some help. Or when somebody comes and says, yeah, I'm having a rough week and I don't know how I'm going to get groceries for my kids. I'll pray for God to get you some groceries. So then Jesus goes back to the story a little while later. The Levite who worked in the temple came along. He also saw the man lying there and passed by on the other side of the road. Finally, a man from Samaria came along, and when he saw the man, he stopped to help him. He put medicine on his wounds, and he wrapped them with bandages. That isn't all. He took the man to an inn and took care of him. The next day he gave the innkeeper some money and told him to take care of the man. Give him anything he needs. If it costs more than I have given, I will pay you next time I am here. Then Jesus asked, which of these three men was a neighbor to the man who was attacked by the robbers? The lawyer answered, the one who helped him. You are right, Jesus said. Now go and do the same. I want you to turn with me quickly because we're going to do communion this morning. And that's the end of my notes. That right there, what I just read to you, is the end of my notes. And you know what that means? It means absolutely nothing. It's just the end of my notes. Now, I felt the Lord speaking this morning in our Sunday school class to add this at the end. So Jesus tells this lawyer, when Jesus finally reveals to this lawyer, answers his question, who is my neighbor? And Jesus has this command, not a suggestion, not a ministry idea for somebody else to do, which I get a lot of those. Pastor, what we need to do, and I go, okay, you can do that. No, not me. Pamela needs to do it. Oh, that kind of ministry. That's not what Jesus is saying here. Jesus looks at the man and says, now that you got it, now that the light bulb went off, go and do the same. So he says that to the lawyer, and I want you to remember that. Matthew 28, starting in verse 16, says, now the 11 disciples went to Galilee, to the mountain to which Jesus had directed them. And when they saw him, they worshipped him, but some doubted. And Jesus came and said to them, all authority in heaven and on earth has been given to me. Go, therefore, and make disciples of all nations, baptizing them in the name of the Father, and of the Son, and of the Holy Spirit, teaching them to observe all that I have commanded you. And behold, I am with you always to the end of PH. That powerful word that begins verse 19. Go. Now, after you've disciplined your kid for doing something that they knew they shouldn't have done and they did it anyway, and you're angry and you're upset and you finally have given out all the discipline and now it's time for them to go to their room, how do you normally say it? And you say, go. How do you normally say it? Oh, whatever. Somebody, please go. Oh, you're wrong. There you go. There, Lynn was the honest one. She even made the face of it. I can't even do the face. That scares me. That's why I'm good in the office. I don't want to get that face. He says, go. This is only 2 instances that I'm bringing up to you, and there's numerous, where Jesus looks at a person or a group after revelation comes of who he is, what he's doing, what his mission for being here, and then what our mission for being here is. And he makes the same statement over and over and over. Go. Here's my challenge to you, and it's got to be done within the next 5 to 10 minutes, is find a scripture or scriptures that says, sit and do not go. Give my buddy a Bible right here. Get Jack a Bible. He's the one to see if he can find those verses. He says, go. Here's the truth. Here's the truth. In our Sunday school class, we were talking today, and I had a dear friend at my mom and dad's church who passed away just a few months ago. And he was my Royal Ranger commander. I think he was somewhere around almost breaking 90 when he passed away. And Brother Poppy was his name. This little short, but meaner than a snake guy, if he had to be. Old military guy. And I always still remember this the day I died. On the back of his little S10 pickup had this sticker that said, "You touching my truck, I'm breaking your face." Why I remember that, I don't know, but it was funny because this little old guy to get out of the truck. But he would come to me nonstop because he knew I had a heart for outreach and evangelism. He would, "Pastor Aaron, I know what we're doing wrong here at this church. I know why it's not growing anymore." I go, "Really, Brother Poppy?" Because I know it's not. "Really, Brother Poppy, what are we doing wrong? We don't go door to door anymore. We're not knocking on doors and we're not handing out tracts anymore. That's why our churches aren't growing." Because I still do it all the time. If you want to go, I go every Saturday. I go door to door. And I looked at him and I said, "Brother Poppy, it's a problem with our church is that we're not going door to door and we're not handing out tracts and our church isn't growing. Why aren't people coming with you if you're going door to door handing out tracts?" Oh, my son and girl, it's time for lunch. It got pretty quiet. Here's the reality: in the 70s, door to door was cool because, and those of you from that time period can remember this, people didn't even have to know each other, and they would stay at their houses. I remember when Keith Green, many of you remember Keith Green, the musician, the piano player, singer, great guy, ended up buying 6 or 7 houses in this area, all right next to each other, and he pretty much opened it and said, "If you all have a place to stay, y'all can stay here till you need to move on." And so people would just, sometimes there'd only be a handful, sometimes there'd be 20, 30 people in a house. Those days do not exist today. I don't want 20 people that I don't know coming in my house. Something bad will happen if 20 people are in my house and I don't know them. door-to-door today does not work. How many of you get excited when you finally make it home and you get in your pajamas and you get in the recliner and you recline it back and you turn your show on and then you hear that knock? How many of you just go, thank you, somebody's at the door? Or how many of you roll your eyes and go, this better be good? That's why door-to-door doesn't work. That's why tracks don't work. Jesus actually, in front of all of us, over 2,000 years ago, laid the example out for us, and we're still acting like we're trying to figure out the equation, and we don't know what it is yet. But somebody titled it this, and I think this is probably the best title for the culture, the society that we live in today. It is relationship evangelism. It is harder to witness to somebody and lead them to salvation without knowing them. Can I tell you what would happen if I walked up in a store to some stranger and I said, Jesus loves you, you're going to hell if you haven't accepted him in your life. Would you like for me to pray for you right now so you can go to heaven? Guess with me what's going to happen. Security, there's a nut in Walmart. They're all crazy there. They go, which one? Which aisle? It doesn't work. And what I would tell Brother Bobby is this. I said, you know the stuff that absolutely drives you nuts that people do to you? You need to think about that because some of that stuff you're doing to people in the name of God. And they're looking at you going, I can't stand this guy. I wish he would leave me alone and let me do my job. Jesus shows us with the lawyer. He shows us with the 11 when he commands them to the mountain to which to go. And they follow his command. They come to the mountain, right? It said it in Matthew 28. What do they do next? They make it to the mountain. They do what? They worship. Right? Because Jesus is there. He's the King of Kings, the Lord of Lords, so they start worshiping. So we're seeing the Spirit moving in these people. They're paying attention to who it is that's there and why they're there. But something happens. What happens? Some of them doubted. You know, it's kind of that thing of like, hey, look, it's cool, I can walk on water. Hold on, I am walking on water. Kind of that thing, you remember that? That's what's happening here. Is these people are worshiping. Now say what you said in Sunday school class, Elaine, when I said, how are these people doubting when they've spent all this time with Jesus and they've seen all this stuff happen, but yet they go to the mountain, they start worshiping him, and then they doubt? What was it you blurted out? She's like, I don't even know what color my shirt is right now. She had a look. It's pink. She blurted out, he's already been crucified. Joyce, what else do you need? He's fed 5,000 people. Have you done that yet? He took a guy that's never seen, put mud in his eyes, and now the guy can see. Have you done that? He took a guy that couldn't walk, that had to crawl on the ground, and he touched him, and the man stood up and grabbed his mat and walked away. Have you done that? He's walked on water. He's calmed seas. He's hung on a cross, comes out and talks to them, and yet they're there, raising their hands and worshiping, and then some doubt. The whole time Jesus is trying to teach them. And it always came back to the same thing, like the thing with Thomas. If I could just touch it, if I could just see that it's not an illusion, that this isn't David Copperfield, but that this is real. Sorry, that's the only magician. I don't know the new ones. If there's newer ones, probably shouldn't have used it. He wanted to touch, and to me that represents, once Thomas could touch Jesus, he knew who he was. He had a relationship with him. You can't walk up to some stranger and just touch them. But Thomas said, if I could just touch you, if I could just feel those scars, if I could just touch you, hold you, then I can believe. And Jesus is teaching us the same thing today. He's saying, Jill, how do you think your neighbor is going to come to the Lord if you don't even know their name? How are you going to get them to come to church if they don't even know you go to church? How are you going to lead them in a salvation prayer if they don't even know that you pray? I had a friend of mine that told me, he was honest enough, that he said one day he came home early. On a Sunday, their church got out, and he's the pastor of a church, and his neighbor said, oh, did you get off work early? And he said, yeah. And he assumed that the neighbor was talking about him being a pastor. And he goes, man, I would not want your job having to work that shift where you have to work every Sunday. And he thought he was a factory worker. Didn't even know that he was pastoring a church and it was his next door neighbor that he would talk to occasionally when they would mow grass, when they would rake up the leaves. So some of you may be asking that question like that lawyer did to Jesus. Who's my neighbor? Did you notice that Jesus didn't say it's the house next to your house? He purposefully took him to a place that wasn't near his house, to somebody that was in need. And that was supposed to be his neighbor. He was supposed to love that person like he would want to be loved. And maybe this sounds selfish, but what Daniel and I did yesterday and the day before, and many times that I've done things for Lynn, is I do that because I pray if I'm ever in that place that she is, that somebody would do that for me. But the truth is, we live in a world today. When was the last time you helped an elderly lady unload her trunk of groceries and take them into her house without getting paid, without knowing that something was coming in return? When was the last time that somebody was at your house and they're wearing shoes that don't fit them, or they're worn out and you've got plenty in your closet, and you go and grab a pair and say, here, take these. Oh, and by the way, you didn't get the old pair that's raggedy that you don't wear anymore. You give them the pair that you just bought that you haven't even put on yet. When was the last time you've done that? And that's the world that we live in, and it cannot creep into the church. There should be no place in the church for that type of attitude. It should be, when my brother or sister calls, it should be an automatic thing that my church will help me. I've had a lot of pastor friends of mine move to churches where it was them and their family that unloaded their truck at the new church. And not a soul from the church come and help the new pastor move in. That should never happen in the house of God. Or if you get stuck at school and your car not working, you need a ride and your pastor's there, and you say, Pastor, and it was totally out of my direction, out of my way. I just want to make that point. Lisa said, can you give me a ride home? My car's broken, if I can get Dave. And so he did it. I did it because I would want that to be done, and I also did it because I knew Lisa would have done the same thing for me. So you've got neighbors right now that you don't even know that are looking at you saying, won't you be my neighbor? Won't you know who I am? Won't you ask me my name? Won't you take time? Here's the real reason why I probably wouldn't have trouble getting a bunch of you to go door to door, but I would have maybe one or two people that would be willing to do relational evangelism with me, is door-to-door cost you nothing. I could go to Pamela's house and knock on her door and not know who she is and say, Jesus loves you, come to church with me. And she says no, and I go, okay, thanks. Walk away. What did that cost me? What investment did I have? Besides maybe, this wouldn't happen to me, but maybe some of you, embarrass you a little bit. That's it. But now I take you and I teach you scripturally how to evangelize and disciple somebody, and now you've got to go places and you got to ask them their name, and you got to talk to them about their kids, and you got to talk to them about where they work, and what they love, and what they hate. Pastor, when would I do that? I don't know, maybe Monday night, maybe Saturday. Pastor, I got things to do. I'm busy. Exactly. That's the world that we live in today. And it takes time out of our schedule. Today, I want you to stand with me this morning for a moment. I find it amazing that Fred Rogers, known as Mr. Rogers to probably the last 50 years of television watchers, one day turned on the television and very quickly got angry and shut the television off and said, there is absolutely nothing on here for children. This is junk. That's how Mr. Rogers' Neighborhood got started. And he didn't know that he was an ordained Presbyterian minister. And that's why almost every episode you watched, you could find some kind of, a lot of people just thought, this is a nice guy. And he was secretly teaching our children, and some of us that are now adults, moral ethics that were scripturally based. But somebody asked him when he got toward the end and when he was sick, did you ever think it was going to be this big? Did you ever think that wherever you went, people would go, Mr. Rogers, almost not even know your name is Fred? He goes, no. He goes, but I didn't do it for that. I don't really care about that. Dressed the same from day one to the last episode. Lived in a little house. But he had this thing in his head that he could not get out, that I believe God implanted in there. As he said, I just saw that people weren't loving their neighbors. And I thought this